Hello everyone, Father's Day is next month and I have a Father's Day card idea for you using pattern papers for the background and dies for the sentiment. Here are the pattern papers that I picked. This is what I had at home. You can use any other pattern papers you have. For example, I got the inspiration for the background from this card. I made it a few weeks ago, and as you see, I used completely different papers, but the idea is the same. I started cutting the pattern papers into stripes in different sizes using my paper trimmer. I wanted to have some thicker stripes and some thinner. After I cut all the stripes, since they have different patterns and colors, what I like to do in this situation so they blend better together, I like to use a distress ink and apply it along the edges. Most of the time I use brown inks for this, mainly the vintage photo, but you could also use other ink colors that match the colors of the pattern papers. But the brown inks are sort of neutral colors and they seem to work with all kinds of papers. I apply the ink along the edges. I just lifted each strip and with the basic blending tool from Ranger, I applied the ink along the edges. You could try other tools as well, but I find this tool to work the best because you can apply the ink right along the edges. This technique is one of my first techniques I learned when I started card making. I learned it from Jennifer McGuire. At that time, I used a lot of pattern papers, and ever since, when I'm using pattern papers, I always use this technique or something similar using distress inks and applying it along the edges of the paper. I applied the ink over all of the stripes, and after I was done, I started adhering the stripes on top of a paper that is in the size of my card base. I used a 220-gram white cardstock from House of Cards and Paper, which is similar to Nina Solar White. You could also use a slightly lighter paper if you have. I just don't like to use anything too thin. I was adhering the stripes diagonally. I didn't do this in a specific order, just what felt right to me. To adhere them, I used a tape runner, which I applied on the back of the stripes. If you have a bigger adhesive sheet that you can apply on the full background, you can use that. You could also use a liquid glue, which will give you a better wiggle room. Whatever you feel is more suitable for you. In this case, I preferred the tape runner. And I was adhering the stripes one by one. After all the stripes were adhered, I used my scissors and roughly cut off the excess. I was going to use a stitch rectangular die, so it did not need to be perfect. As I said, I used a stitch rectangular die and I die cut the panel. It took 2 passes through the die cutting machine since the piece is a little bit thick. And I also used the vintage photo distress ink and I applied it along the edges of the panel. This is just to match the ink of the stripes and also to cover up the white of the cardstock. So the background is completely done. I'm actually going to be creating a horizontal card because the greeting I was going to be using did not fit vertically. For the sentiment, I just used what I had in my stash. I die cut the word father from a white cardstock using individual letter dies. I had a letter die set from Autonew, and for the word happy and day, I used the word dies. And I die cut them out of a craft cardstock and brown cardstock. Each of the letters and the words I die cut 4 times. This is just to add a dimension. The word dies I die cut 3 times out of a craft cardstock, and 1 layer I die cut out of a brown cardstock. To adhere the letters on top of the pattern paper panel, I first measured the middle and then I started adhering. I kept my ruler on top of the panel, which helped me to adhere the letters in a straight line. I started with the H because it was in the middle, and I placed it slightly left from the middle. And then I adhered the rest of the letters on each side. I also had a die cut of the apostrophe, I think that's how it's called. It's not part of the letter die set. I used a different handwritten word die sentiment that had the letter E in it. I used the leftover, the middle part from the letter E. For the adhering of the letters, I used a glue which wasn't that easy. I have 2 different glues, and one of them was too thick and difficult to get out, and the other one was too runny. I preferred to use glue pens, but unfortunately I didn't have one. The die cuts of the words happy and day I was going to place on top of the word father, happy at the top and day at the bottom. And because they were just partly attached to the letters, I also placed a double-sided tape on the back of the words, on the part that was going to stick out. And because the die cut is quite thin, I had to cut the double-sided tape into very tiny pieces. And the glue I applied on the parts that were over the letters. And lastly, after I adhered all the letters and the words, I adhered the panel on top of a card base using a liquid glue. I used a white card base to match the white letters. And that's it, that's the finished card. I hope you will try creating something similar. If you would like to see more card inspirations for Father's Day or other cards for men, check out this playlist where I have various masculine card ideas. Just change the greeting to fit the occasion. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.